Welcome to session 6, which is Iterate. And let me explain why this session exists. In the previous 5 sessions, you empathized with the user, defined problem, generated ideas, built a prototype, and tested it with real people. So most training programs stop there. They hand you a certificate and call it done. But that's not how design works in the real world. The 5-stage model, which is empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test, is a teaching tool. It implies a sequence, which is correct. You cannot prototype before you empathize, but it also implies an ending, which is wrong. Testing does not produce a finished product. It produces learning, and learning demands action. That action is iteration. So you take what the tester did, not what they said, what actually they did, and you make one specific deliberate change. Then you test again. This loop, build, test, learn, adjust, is where all good design lives. So in the next few minutes, right, you will experience that loop once fully. You will identify one change from your testing feedback. You will make that change in under, let's say, 20 minutes. You will test it with one new person, and you will write a 4-part rationale explaining exactly what changed, why it changed, what improved, and how you know it worked. This is not about perfection. It is about evidence, one change, one test, one clear reason. That is your output, and that is iteration. So let me show you what the full loop actually looks like and why each back word, uh, arrow matters. So most people see 5 stages in a row. The real process has 5 return paths, each with a specific trigger and a specific destination. Understanding which path to take is the core skill of this session. Path 1 is all about test to empathize. Your tester fundamentally misunderstood the user context, that is, their motivation, their emotional state, their daily reality. This means your empathy work was built on assumptions, not observation. You do not rewrite the POV yet. You go back and observe again. You interview, you watch, you gather real data. Path 2, which is test to define. Your tester reveals the problem you chose is not the problem they have. The point of view itself is wrong. You rewrite it, you generate new how might be questions. You do not salvage the existing prototype. The foundation has shifted. Part 3 is test to iterate. Ideate. The problem is correct, but none of your ideas solve it well enough. The concept needs replacement, not refinement. You return to ideation with the same HMW. You run focused crazy eights on the specific gap testing revealed. Path 4 is test to prototype. This is the most common path. The concept is sound. One element of the prototype confused the tester, which is a label, a flow, a visual hierarchy. You fix that element, you do not touch the concept. This is where most of you will land today. Path 5 is about prototype to define. This is rare but critical. While building, you realize the point of view contains a contradiction no prototype can resolve. You stop building immediately, you rewrite the point of view before testing even happens. Each path is different diagnosis. Choosing the wrong path wastes your remaining time. Choosing the right path fast is your competitive advantage. So let me show you what iteration looks like when it happens at the scale of entire companies. Because the mechanism you will use today in this room in this particular session is exactly the same mechanism that built three of the most valuable products in the world. The first example is Instagram, which began its life in 2010 as an app called Bourbon. That, yes, Burbn, uh, right, that Kevin Systrom built as a location-based check-in service with games, points, and photo sharing. When Systrom and his team observed actual user behavior, they discovered that people were completely ignoring the check-in features, the games, and the point system. And the only part of the app that anyone was actually using was the photo filters. Systrom made the decision to delete everything else and relaunch the product as Instagram in October 2010. And by April 2012, the platform had reached 100 million users and was acquired by Facebook for $1 billion, which was only 18 months after the pivot had occurred. The company that exists today was literally built from the insight that users ignored 90% of what had originally been built. The second example is Slack, which started in 2011 as a company called Tiny Speck that launched an online multiplayer game called Glitch, which never managed to find a sustainable audience. While the team was building Glitch, they had created an internal messaging tool to coordinate their own development work. And when they looked at their usage data, they discovered that this internal messaging tool was being used more accurately than the game itself. And external beta testers were responding more positively to the messaging tool than they were to Glitch. The team shut down the game entirely and launched Slack publicly in 2013. And by 2019, the company was valued at $27 billion at its IPO. The entire pivot was identified from usage data, which means the team was watching what people actually used rather than asking them what they said they would use. The third example is YouTube, which was founded in 2005 by three former PayPal employees as a video-based dating site. Yes, video-based dating site where users would upload short video profiles and other users would rate them. Early usage data and user testing showed that people were not using the platform for dating at all. And instead, they were uploading music clips, personal moments, viral content, and all kinds of other videos. The team removed the dating mechanic entirely in May 2005 and repositioned the platform as a general video sharing site. And Google acquired YouTube in $1.65 billion in October 2006, which was only 18 months after the company had been founded. What all three of these cases share is that none of the pivots came from a planning session, none of them came from a whiteboard exercise, and none of them came from asking users what they wanted. Every single one of them came from watching what users actually did with the product and having the discipline to follow that behavior rather than defend the original plan. That is the exact principle that you will enact today at the scale of a single prototype and one deliberate change. Now we move from theory to practice, and this is where your discipline will be tested because the natural instinct when you receive critical feedback is to fix everything at once. And that instinct is exactly what you must resist in this exercise. So you have actually got 30 minutes for 4 steps. You may pause this video after listening to me. And the entire exercise is built around a single constraint, which is that you will make exactly one change, not two, not a list of improvements, but one specific and traceable change. Because if you change three things between version 1 and version 2, and the user reacts differently, you will have no way of knowing which change caused the difference, and that destroys the learning value of the entire exercise. Step one is to identify the one change by asking yourself what is the single most critical fix, and you must write it in one sentence that is specific enough to be actionable. So instead of saying improve the design, you would say change the headline so users immediately understand who this product is for. And if you cannot write it in one sentence, you have not yet found the change and you need to go back to your feedback grid. Step two is to decide what kind of problem you're actually facing, because this determines where your energy goes. And you have three possibilities, which are a point of view problem, meaning your insight was wrong and you need to go back to define a prototype problem, meaning your execution was unclear and you need to fix the prototype itself, or a concept problem, meaning your idea does not address the how might we, and you need to go back to ideate. And you should make this decision in under 5 minutes, because deliberation beyond that is usually avoidance. Step five is to make the change in under 20 minutes, which means if you are working with paper, you draw the revised version on a new sheet and label it clearly as version 2 with the date and the element changed. And if you're working digitally, you duplicate the affected slide in Canva, make only one change on the duplicate, and add a small text note explaining what changed and why. And you must keep version 1 visible, because without uh, the before, there's no story and the iteration has no meaning. So step 4 is to test the revised version with one person using the same rules from session 5, uh, which are that you show the prototype without explaining it, and you listen to the feedback without defending your choices, and you only question at the end, right, is whether the specific change fixed the specific problem or revealed a new one, because either outcome is valuable as long as you know which one occurred. So if you find yourself wanting to redesign the entire prototype during those that 20 minutes, stop immediately and ask yourself what is the single most important thing to fix. And if you cannot answer that in one sentence, you're not iterating, you're reacting. And the discipline of choosing one change is the actual skill the session is designed to build. You have now completed session 6, and what you hold in your hands is not merely a revised slide or a redrawn sketch, but evidence that you can learn from a real person. Make one deliberate adjustment based on what you observed and verify whether the adjustment produced the effect you intended. This is the design process operating in its most honest form, because iteration is not about arriving at perfection within a single cycle, but about building the habit of responding to evidence with action rather than defending your previous choices with excuses. And the four-part rationale you have written is what transforms a vague feeling of improvement into a traceable decision that you or anyone else can examine and evaluate. What comes next is session 7, of course, which is present. And in that session, each of you will deliver a 3-minute structured demonstration of your prototype. And the structure is specific because you will state the problem you chose, the point of view that guided you, the prototype you built, the most a surprising insight from your testing, the one change you made in the session, and the next step you would take if you had more time. So the rule for that presentation is simple, which is uh, that you show the prototype itself and not slides about the product, because the product is the evidence and your audience needs to see it, touch it, or interact with it directly. You have now completed 6 of 8 sessions. And the loop you practiced today is not a classroom exercise, in fact, but the actual mechanism by which every product you admire was built. So take the discipline with you, apply it to the next problem you encounter, and remember that the speed at which you can move through this loop is what separate you from everyone else who stops at the first version.